Learn to keep people dependent on you. To maintain your independence, you must always be needed and wanted. The more you are relied on, the more freedom you have. Make people depend on you for their happiness and prosperity, and you have nothing to fear. Never teach them enough so that they can do without you. The 48 Laws of Power, Robert Greene.
Based on that quote that I started off this video, I want to tell a couple stories to set up the gist of this video. First is when I had a tutoring business, I had a young lady that was seeing me, and her parents signed her up for 10 hours, and she did 10 hours, and they signed her up for another 10 hours, and then she stopped coming. She was a geometry student, and so a little bit of time after that, I saw her at a football game, and I asked her, I says, how come you stop coming to tutoring? And she told me, she goes, I understand everything. I'm getting an A now. I don't need to go. Okay. And so based on Robert Greene's, philosophy on power, I should have made her dependent, but, being a teacher, the idea is to shoot her so she doesn't need me, That's the whole goal of me teaching, is to get these kids so where they can move on to life, hopefully become a self-learner for life and do well in whatever it is they have to do and not be dependent on me for their livelihood. And so the second story happens to be, I was in a fashion class. And normally when I do a fashion class, something like this, I really don't do much. It's pass out a packet and, colors, patterns, textures, and stuff I have no idea about. And then at 5 minutes before the end of class, till all the kids put it in their bin, and then wait for the bell to ring and off they go, and then I repeat the process. So it's not that difficult of a class, even though the teacher says that other subs can't do that for some reason. I don't know. And in this particular class, one girl was sewing. She was sitting next to me, and then sitting next to this girl was another girl, and across from her was another girl. Now, the two girls who were not sewing were having a conversation. I'm trying not to pay attention to it, but eventually I did. And what they were talking about was, apparently one of the girls was dating a third girl, and the other girl was her friend. And so the girl's saying, why did you dog this girl out? She was my friend. She really liked you. And it's kind of strange, but if you haven't been in high school in a long time, you'll find that there's a lot more girl-girl relationships than before. And there's probably just as many girl-girl relationships as boy-boy. Or boy-girl. There's no boy-boys. I don't see them. I see some, obviously flaming boys, but you really see two guys together in the helicopter coming by here. So I see girl couples, they'll walk to class together, they'll make out, and then one will head off her way, and the other one will go into that class. So it's not a rare sight. And these girls are having this conversation. Now, the girl sewing turned to me and said, I can understand a girl liking a girl, a boy liking a boy, but I don't understand why we need 17 genders. And I said, okay. And I said that there is something called what I call the oppression Olympics. People are trying to see who can be the biggest victim. And in order to understand this, you have to understand there's three pillars to this victim Olympics. Now, the first pillar is me, the oppressor. Based on my existence as a white heterosexual male, I am the ultimate oppressor. And now they add even another term called cis. So I'm a cisgendered white heterosexual male. If you don't understand what that means, cis is a male that identifies as a male and not a male that identifies as a female or something non-male. So that's what cis means. So they're adding these terms in so we can have narrower and narrower groups, and I can be, the ultimate oppressor, not by anything I do or how I act, but just by my mere existence. I'm deemed an oppressor. Okay? And you look at what happened to Brandon Straka, talked about white gay men. Since they have become more accepted, got a mail truck coming by here. Sorry, I get distracted a bit trying to keep focus. But you have a white gay men are, since the Supreme Court decision to allow gay marriage, they're no longer oppressed, so they're kicked out of the alphabet community because they're no longer oppressed people. So that's how this thinking goes here. And so you have the oppressed people. Well, then you also have, or the oppressor is me, but then you also have oppressed people, whoever I'm deemed to be oppressing, and all these, various groups who are oppressed, not by anything that happens, but just by their existence. And so you can, any group that's, almost non male and white is an oppressed group of some degree, but there are levels of who is most oppressed. They have an Olympics of who can be the most victimized group, and thus try to gain resources for grievances. Okay, this is kind of what happens. And so, but the third pillar of this, besides the oppressor and the oppressed, is probably the most important, and that is the champion. The champion is the advocate for the oppressed group, okay? And they gain power by this advocation, and they gain money by being advocates. But what they never do is solve the problem, because the last thing the champion wants is have the problem solved, because then they have no reason for their existence. They lose power and thus income based off not having anything to advocate for. And a good example of this, and as there's less oppression, they got to find it, they got to search for it. And an example is this: when my niece graduated college, they had a party at a cabin. It was a big cabin, and it became like Weekend at Bernie's. All of a sudden, all these people showed up, and I didn't know a lot of them. They were her friends. It was her party. But what happened, she talked to me before all these people got, and she said she had to take a gender studies class, and I was kind of curious about what a gender studies class, what they did. And she said all they did was complain about patriarchy and male privilege. And then one girl said that she had my niece had thin privilege. Well, my niece, works out. She's a vegan, and daughter of my sister. So what do you say? And so she got taunted because she had pretty privilege, or whatever happens to be that is. So they're worried about what other people's privileges are. And she said she had this assignment, project to do. Now, the project that she had to discuss or write about or spend time on was the invisibility of bisexuals in modern media. And this is a champion in search of an oppressed group. Okay, they're getting so narrow, they need to have this group to be a champion for. And like I said, if racism didn't exist, there's a lot of people that lose power because they need racism to exist in order to have their power as a champion. Like in Robert Greene's 11th law of power is make people dependent. So the champion needs to have oppressed people dependent on the champion. And so that is what I am seeing. I talked to a few other people, and they said that makes sense. What I'm seeing is that you have these champions keeping this oppressor-oppressed dynamic going, and the last thing the champion wants to do is have it resolved. Because if it's resolved, we all get along, we're all, on this equal playing field, and it's racism or whatever doesn't exist, champions are out of a job. They lose power. And so I always ask myself now, if racism didn't exist, which I thought it didn't, as I said in my last video, but if it didn't exist, who loses power? That's the question we all need to ask. And that's probably the people that are trying to keep it going. Because I look around me in where I work, I see blacks, Hispanics, Mexicans get along. They work together, they're professionals, they get along. I really don't see any animosity. People are just able to get along in these structured, small environments. Okay, a school office or in a campus. I go get my tires worked on. I have a mixture of people there. So If those people in those small groups are able to get along, why can't society at large are able to? And my belief is that people are told they can't because the champions will lose power. And I will address this more in other videos, but I want to get the idea out that we do have this concept of the oppressor, the oppressed, and the champion as the three pillars to the oppression Olympics. So hopefully there wasn't too many cars. Wasn't as distracting. Sometimes I kind of get it during these, but I think this is the best way. So keep that in mind until next time. I got more videos to go talk about this. Take care and God bless.